Hello, everyone. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. This is Ken Weed, also from Sportsnet. Together, we are Kenny and Renny. This is the Kenny and Renny show. Not quite a pop-up, I wouldn't call this, Ken. We're just, we can't stay away from each other. We can't stay away from doing this. We love this show so much. So we decided we'd do a post-player avail show just to kind of get an idea of where their heads at, all the things that we heard. Lots of stuff. Really interesting day yesterday. Jets for the Cup here is asking. Thought we'd wait until after Pomo and Chevy were done. Their pressers are tomorrow. Chevy is tomorrow at noon. Paul Maurice tomorrow at 11 o'clock. And we're going to do something after that too, aren't we, Ken? Because it's worth doing something. But everyone, Turd Ferguson's here. He's ready to go. Sandy G, as she's been from the very beginning, is here and ready to go. It's going to be great.
And welcome
stuff.
to Taylor here. Welcome to Taylor, newcomer.
New time? Oh my goodness. I love getting the newbies. It's great getting the newbies. You've missed the whole season. You've missed the meat of it, but you're here for
good
dessert
news.
or the aperitif or whatever you call it. I don't know what it is, but we should get right into it. Ken, how are you doing today?
Tremendous, Sean. Thank you. Yourself?
I'm doing good. We've been talking a lot of stuff behind the scenes. We got a lot of ideas percolating, how we're going to keep serving this audience going forward. I don't think we've kind of landed on it yet, but I think we're going to keep some stuff rolling here. It's going to be great. Oh, check this out. Oh, 70 CCs. Did you see me on the show?
It's funny. I had my wireless headphones in. I did not have the video, but I was listening and I'm like, oh my God, I got to go and watch this show. I have to admit, growing up in Altona, I did not have a trampoline, but one of the people down the street, Greg Lepke, had one, and we definitely did a lot of backflipping at his trampoline at times growing up in Altona. A big fan of the trampoline, and I look forward to watching the backflips here.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. So part of this has to do with when you get older, you start wondering if you can do the stuff that you did when you were a kid. And so I got out there and I'm with the kids and I'm starting to do those things. My crowning achievement when I was younger is I could do a backflip and land I could do a front flip, land, and then do a backflip and just kind of go flop back and forth like that. And so that's what I'm trying to work up to. The body's not as limber as it was when I was 17 years old, so it may take some time. But that's my summer project. I don't know if you have a specific summer project, Ken. That's going to be mine. But
keeping the weight off, that's our other summer project. I got to say, this is not a pat on the back time, but I'm pretty proud of the fact that we both lost the weight going into the season and were able to keep it off during the season also.
Keep it, exactly. Yes, and that's part of it. That's one of the things that we've had the trampoline in the backyard for a number of years. It's fun to be on now because one, I don't feel myself kind of like a whale jumping out of the water and the blubber kind of going everywhere. But two, it's like I can last longer on it. I'm not so tired when I'm on it. So anyways, we'll move on from that. Let's get into hockey. I was just on Winnipeg Sports Talk with Huss, and I had said I thought that was the most interesting Winnipeg Jets postseason avail session that I'd ever seen before. Do you agree with that? 2019 he brought up was pretty interesting. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, totally different scenarios, obviously, right? 2019 was still when we were allowed in the Matt Frost Media Center, and I think that was the first time that they kind of brought a couple players up together and kind of led to some different scenarios. But yeah, I mean, certainly a lot of, we have dynastic discussions, and we had a big frustrating rant from Mark Scheifele. Folks are talking about it all over the hockey world. And I think first and foremost, what I would like to say, Sean, we do say often, we don't want players to be spitting cliches. Mark Scheifele certainly did not do that. I appreciate his conviction. He honestly has doubled down on his belief, and he definitely would have raised a few eyebrows in the NHL head offices and in the Department of Player Safety with this commentary. The one thing, I have no problem with what Mark said or how he said it, but I think the discussion and the narrative would be completely different if he just added two small words, which are actually big words, into the discussion. If he had just added an "I'm sorry," I totally understand that he doesn't feel that he did anything wrong. And in a lot of ways now, I'm not trying to contradict myself. I can appreciate he doesn't feel that, but I just feel that, and I'm not saying Mark is trying to get any sympathy here. We know he respects the game and all players, and he wasn't trying to injure his opponent, but If he had just added "and I'm sorry" to the discussion, I think that the view would be completely different in some of those other markets. The us against the world mentality is not a new one. We know that as Winnipeggers and Manitobans, there is a bit of an occasional inferiority complex. I don't mind him playing up that angle, but he needs to check the receipts to a degree as well. I mean, most people pick the Jets to beat Montreal, and no one in this market was saying that they want Montreal to advance. I think maybe that was more of a national narrative he was trying to speak towards, but I don't think that anyone in Winnipeg's market felt that the Jets were going to be a bottom feeder, nor were they feeding that narrative with any writing or reporting during the course of the season. Sean, Mark said he felt for Jake Evans, and he was, his regret was that he was injured. I don't think he ever said, "I'm sorry for finishing the hit." And I'm not saying he's sorry for finishing the hit. This is how I would explain it. The charging element, he's battling against science. I don't think for 1 second that Mark Scheifele was necessarily having to finish the hit and that it would catch the chin. The part of the hit was perfect. Shoulder to the chest, elbows in. But because he was battling science, because he traveled 190 feet, there's no way for him to go except through the body. So he needed to catch more of the body, and if he hadn't caught the head, we would not be having this discussion. I do agree with his assessment that the penalty was excessive. I thought a 2-game suspension would have been enough, and it's terrible timing for the Jets that the Department of Player Safety decided they were tired of hearing from people that the suspensions aren't long enough. So they made an example on a play where they could set a precedent because they want to eliminate those hits. So lots to chew on there for sure. What were your thoughts?
Well, here, I'm going to read something here. And I'm switching pages, but I think you'll still be able to see me. So Eric Engels, our guy in Montreal, who's, made his thoughts pretty well known about this on Tim and Friends.
Yep. I saw that. I saw it.
I was just on Huss's show, Winnipeg Sports Talk, and was talking about it. I think that Mark Scheifele has made himself a bit of a villain outside of this market by handling it the way that he has. I think right now Eric Engels may be a little bit of a villain in this market because of the strong stance that he's taken. But to everything you were talking about, science and everything about that, and Mark Scheifele kind of sticking to the idea that this was a totally clean hit. This is Paul Byron, who before this play against Mackenzie Weegar, where he was suspended 3 games for hitting Mackenzie Weegar to the head, was in the same position as Mark Scheifele, hadn't ever been suspended, totally clean record, gets suspended for this hit. This is what he said at that time. He said, "I accept and respect the decision made by the Department of Player Safety. I would like to make it clear I had no intention of causing injury or finishing my check through Mackenzie Weegar's head. I think my history and the way I conduct myself on the ice show a lack of intent to injure other players. Despite the lack of intention, I have to accept the responsibility for my hit and realize the result of the hit was to the head and caused an injury. I would like to sincerely apologize for my hit and wish Mackenzie all the best and hope he's okay. I've learned a lesson through this, and I will make sure any future hits result in a clean and legal fashion." So this, to me, is exactly what Mark Scheifele should have read. Despite the lack of intention, I have to accept the responsibility for my hit and realize the result of the hit was to the head and caused an injury. If anyone out there is saying that head contact was not made, forget the initial point of contact, all that kind of stuff. If anyone is saying that there was not head contact that caused problems and caused an injury, it's just wrong. It's on video. It's simple. It's wrong. And this is, I think, what everyone needed to hear from Mark Scheifele. And I'll be honest with you, Ken, I don't understand why the Winnipeg Jets, after this is all said and done, I've talked to some people around the league, and everyone's wondering what they have to gain from this. Like, what does a lack of contrition earn the Jets in this case? That's what I don't understand, because right now, even if you were a Winnipeg Jets fan and you thought, he's right, there's nothing wrong with that hit, that's a totally clean hit. If Mark Scheifele goes out and says, you know what, I'm really sorry that he got hurt, I'm going to try and make sure that never happens again, because I don't want to be a player who puts players in a situation where they get injured. You don't lose Winnipeg Jets fans by saying that. There's nothing to be gained by what he did other than potentially creating a barrier between you and the league going forward. It was to the point that when that was done, I called you and I asked you, Ken, do you think that maybe that was the attitude he took into the meeting? And the league said, maybe he could have got to go away with 2 games, but the league said, this guy is showing zero contrition at all. And clearly he said he didn't say this, but to me, Mark Scheifele said, there's nothing I would do different. I challenge the league to tell me what I could have done differently. So Mark Scheifele has basically said to the league, I'm not sorry. It was a clean hit, and there's nothing I could have done differently. So I think the league, I wonder if the league actually came down harder on him, and that 4-game suspension may have been less because Mark Scheifele showed absolutely no inkling of being sorry or remorseful for that situation.
I mean, it could have, you'd hope that doesn't come into play too much, but certainly this one here by a cash. I mean, this is how I led our hit yesterday. Right?
We lost Vern, who's been around for a long time. Vern Fecto has been with us for a long time, but I guess me sharing that is too much for Vern. So
sorry, one quick thing too, folks. We know this is a polarizing issue, but as you know, if you've been here before, this is not a place for name calling. Okay, you can disagree on your opinions. Let's just do it in a in a manner that is respectful. That's all. You don't have to agree with what is being said on either side. We know this is a very emotional subject, but no name calling, and let's keep it classy here, folks, because that's what we try to do here. I think frustration is a major element here. Speaking about this with someone very plugged into the league this year too. Mark Scheifele, in the prime of his hockey career as a top 10 NHL scorer, has been able to play 1 game and 3 shifts in the last 2 playoff series where he felt the Jets had a legitimate chance. For me, he's emotional. I would be emotional. You would be emotional. People are emotional. We know that. And I'm not asking Mark Scheifele to lie. I'm just saying that I think that the perception would be a lot different if he had just added those 2 words. I'm sorry. I appreciate him sticking to his guns and not quitting on his team. All of those things are important. But I just think that there was there's one addition to that would have made it easy. That used to be a clean hit headshot. It used to be a clean hit, but it's not. Head contact is no longer considered a clean hit. I think I also want to say this. The effort on the back check is something, go back and watch the tape. The effort on Mark Scheifele's back check is absolutely incredible. He starts a half zone, almost a complete zone behind Neil Pionk. He comes from just below the goal line and passes Pionk and is able to catch Evans, but he wasn't going to beat him to the far post, and that is when he decided to finish his check. So there are consequences. There are consequences for his actions. I think those were excessive consequences, but Sean, we've talked about this as well. It almost rarely gets up. The defense that the player makes in his meeting almost never ends up in the video, at least from my knowledge. We watch a lot of those videos. I'm not saying the league was mocking Scheifele's, his side of the story, but they certainly weren't buying it. They went out of their way to include it in the video. So I think that goes back to your point of saying maybe they felt they had to come down a little bit harder because no responsibility was taken on that front. We've got a lot to get to. We know this is a topic that people are fired up about, but unless there's something else you want to wrap on it. And this hang on, Jeff.
If people want to talk about this.
I know people are showing the Torrey Krug clip. No, that 2 wrongs don't make a right. If the league messed up a couple of years ago by not suspending the player on the play, that's not to say free reign for everybody from now into eternity. No, that's a bad argument. A bad argument. That should have been a suspension for Torrey Krug. And again, we celebrate hits that Eric Lindros used to throw and been on the receiving end on. We don't call that a clean hit anymore. It was a clean hit in the 80s and the 90s. It's not a clean hit in 2021. You can't you can't make head contact even when it's accidental.
Here's the other thing. Headshot says, did Montreal media ask Petrie for his headshot on Galchenyuk? We're not asking Mark Scheifele to apologize. I don't need an apology from him. I'm saying that I think an apology would have helped his case.
Same here.
I think
I'm
showing
not saying
some
he should.
contrition would have showed his case. Well, I'm not demanding anything. That's not our job. We don't care about that. We're not here saying that. And I think that's one of the things that people get heated about. I'm not here to say that. Mark Scheifele handles his business how he wants to handle it, or how the team should handle it. That's their thing. My job is to cover it. So we're covering this, and we're just kind of, I think a lot of people are wondering why, and I'm not saying that's the answer either, but I'm wondering why it was that stiff a penalty as well. These are the things that we're working through and saying, okay, maybe it's this, maybe it's this. I have to wonder if Mark Scheifele, I can tell you this, I know from talking with some sources in the business that the league thought that they let Mark Scheifele off light. Like, this isn't a situation where the league is sitting back and thinking, man, we really stuck to them. The league wanted him gone for the entire series. They didn't want a chance for him to get back in that series because they thought the hit warranted that. They went for because he hadn't had a history. That's what I'm being told. Now, that's very likely to just inflame people even more and make people angry more. But the idea that Ken and I are sitting here demanding an apology from Mark Scheifele,
no, that's not what we're saying at all.
It's not the case. We don't ask for that. It's not our job to. But our job is to take a look at the idea that if Mark Scheifele handles this different, is the outcome any different? That's all we're talking about here. And again, people are going to be heated. Someone brought up the kid getting beat up and having his jersey taken. It's ridiculous. And I kind of joked about this on one of the shows that I was on over the last couple of days here, but sorry.
There you go, Jack.
There you go.
Who, Sean or I? You need to specify. You need to specify.
We're both wrong.
It could be both of us wrong, but
so
you should specify.
It's one or the other, or both of us. Thank you for that, Jack. I joked about this the other day, or I think I joked about it on our last show, our last post-game show. I left the arena, and there was just a mob of people outside. Maybe I shouldn't use the term mob, but when something like this happens, it's accurate in that case. But I mean, in my younger days, I probably would have stuck around and, hey, if they're trying to, I think I saw a video of them trying to flip over a cop car, which is ridiculous. And anyways, I mean, in my younger days, I probably would have stuck around. I got out there and I thought, this is not anything I want to be a part of. I don't want to be in the middle of any riots, especially with COVID and all this kind of stuff going on. So I just went home. But I mean, anytime someone gets beat up or assaulted for showing team loyalty, like, that's stupid. Like, it's dumb. And I don't think anyone is going to say otherwise. I don't think any level-headed person, I don't care if that guy was in and thumbing his nose at Canadiens fans and telling them they got lucky and whatever. That's stupid. It's ridiculous. Shouldn't happen. Stripping of his jersey. It's dumb. There you go.
Julie, there you go. And sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Brad, rewind the tape. I've already said I appreciate Scheifele's conviction. Good for him for believing it. But if we're talking about if Mark Scheifele wanted some points in the PR battle in other markets, an apology would have helped his cause, and it may have helped his cause in terms of reducing the suspension. I'm not saying he's out here, he should be apologizing, but it would have helped his cause. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And you know what? Here, this is one of the reasons, Ken, I like the format of what we do here. Is like, I like this. Readers and viewers right now, you're holding us accountable. Like, if we were out here and we were just spitting hot takes and had nothing to back them up, you'd be calling us out. We're telling you what we think. We're trying to be as honest as possible. We're trying to give you as much access as you can to our minds, the way we think, the way we cover the game. I love that you're here. I love that you're doing that. I love that you're heated. This is why we do this, is because we, like you, care about this stuff, and we're here to take care of that stuff. So if you've got things to say about us, feel free. Like Ken said, if you can keep it clean, that's going to work. If you can't, we're going to pull you out of the chat room. You can tell us we're as wrong as you want to be. No need to resort to personal attacks. But keep it coming, people. We love this stuff. That's what we're here for. So keep it coming. Let's move on.
Sure.
I wanted your take on Connor Hellebuyck's comments about, that follows a theme of what we saw from player after player after player, showing like a high degree of confidence in this team, in the core of this team, in the direction of this team. Connor Hellebuyck took it to another level, in my opinion, when he said that this team is, essentially on the verge of being a dynasty. Now, I'm trying to think to myself, Ken, how would we even define a dynasty these days? Like, were the Pittsburgh Penguins and their back-to-back cups, is that a dynasty, or do we consider them the last dynasty?
Well, I mean, 3-5 for the Hawks, right? I mean, that would be the closer comparison, but I mean, there's no Islanders or Oilers dynasty currently happening in the NHL. I love the confidence. I love the belief. There's no doubt about that. But I mean, generally, again, welcoming the color and the ferocity of the commentary from Connor Hellebuyck. But generally, dynasties don't start getting talked about until one championship is
until you're one or two championships,
or at least made it to the final and maybe lost in Game 7. But again, love the honesty there, love the passion. Connor Hellebuyck is I mean, you used the word defiant in our hit yesterday. I loved Connor Hellebuyck's comment. That's what he wants. I think it's fantastic. I mean, a lot of people making jokes about NWO and things about that. Like last one about Scheifele from Shark Meifele. Scheifele is turning heel for 21-22 season. It would be a strange turn of events for Mark to turn full heel, but appreciate the wrestling references there for sure. Loved what I heard from Hellebuyck. Are the Jets a piece or two away from being a dynasty? Well, they're going to have to go a lot further than they have so far for that to be the case, but love the confidence. If again, it all starts with belief. If you don't believe in yourself, no one is going to believe in you and try to help you. Connor Hellebuyck is providing the fuel. I think what we also have to look through in that commentary, he was asked about the direction. He said he loved what he heard from the general manager and the coach in his meetings. He feels they are looking for the type of players for them to become a great team. They have a very good core, but that core needs to be improved. If they can fill a couple of those holes, do they have the potential to be a contender every year, a perennial contender? I think they do, but they need to back it up now. That's right. The words are excellent. Now it's about actions for the Winnipeg Jets. For a team that's won 3 series in 10 years, it's certainly a bold proclamation, but I would much rather hear about bold proclamations than no proclamations. But at the same time, now it's time for the Jets to back those things up.
I think there's 2 ways of looking at this.
And he can back it up.
Well, and so there you go. So there's 2 ways of looking at this. One is Connor Hellebuyck is the guy who long before he won a Vezina told you that he was going to go win a Vezina, right?
What did he do?
So there you go. He went and he backed that up. So we know at the very least that Connor Hellebuyck is a guy who is going to work his ass off to back up whatever he says. So Connor Hellebuyck doesn't just want to win a Stanley Cup, and he's said that as well. He wants to be part of a dynasty. He's said that, that Connor Hellebuyck is going to do everything in his power to make that statement come true. So I like that. But I've also said this in the past, Ken, that I haven't necessarily liked some of his comments in the past. And we talked about the maturity that he showed this year in when he was asked to comment about Carey Price. He shut up and he didn't say anything, right? Which is, it's the right thing to do. Kelly Rudy, we had him on our podcast. He said the same thing and talked about the maturity of like, you control what you can control. You can't control the guy across the way. So don't be throwing stones or firing arrows his way, right? That's something he did do. He did that in the past. He did that with Marc-Andre Fleury. It did not work out for him well. He's the goalie that broke in that series, despite the fact that he was, I'm going to say, he was trash talking Marc-Andre Fleury in the media. You and I were both in that scrum. Both of us kind of looked around. Everyone in that scrum looked around to be like, is he really saying what he's saying? Those guys are in trouble over there, stuff against Calgary. I've been vocal in the past and saying I don't think it's the best idea for him to do that. I think this is a little bit of both of those comments, right? I do think it's good that he's saying that because he's backed big talk up before, but he also hasn't backed big talk up before. And if I'm the Tampa Bay Lightning, if I'm the Colorado Avalanche who exist in that very division, if I'm the a number of teams, the Florida Panthers, who are up and coming, if I'm the Montreal Canadiens, who just swept you out of the playoffs, if you're sitting there and you're telling me when you haven't been past the conference finals that you are a dynasty in the waiting, that is, I could take that the wrong way. I can take that as bulletin board material. Do you not agree?
I mean, I can agree why some people would think that, but here's my counter to that, Sean, and no problem. I certainly know where you're coming from, but if you're Connor Hellebuyck, what do you want him to say? We're a bubble team and we're happy being a bubble team? Come on. I mean, no, I want him to say that they want to be a dynasty. I understand it's
are this far apart and further apart, okay?
I mean, he went a little bit further than just saying, I feel like we're knocking on the door. I mean, that would have probably been enough, right? I mean, knocking on the door is different than dynasty. But I love the fact that he brought it. I mean, another great example of goalies, right? I mean, goalies, they have a little bit of a different perspective at times. I mean, Jordan Binnington, do I look nervous? One of the best quotes of that entire run, right? I mean, that's one of the best quotes. It's not saying we're a dynasty, but it's exuding confidence. Kelly Rudy said it on our show. If you're a goalie, he doesn't want you to be passive. Be confident. Like, it's like the quarterback position. There's a little bit of cockiness, but Hellebuyck wasn't saying that out of cockiness. He genuinely believes it. He genuinely believes it. I mean, you can take that view. I'm not taking that view. I want Connor Hellebuyck to keep speaking in those regards, but does he leave himself open for criticism? Sure, but much like before, I don't think that Connor Hellebuyck was wanting to take a shot at Marc-Andre Fleury, but that's what the interpretation was, right? So, ultimately they got to back it up. I mean, the Jets said all the right things about the core, but guess what? Now that core has to go out and win multiple playoff rounds. We know it's not easy. Of course it's not easy, but it's also not easy. No, hang on. Connor Hellebuyck was not asked about a dynasty. That was not a stupid question. It was not a stupid question, nor was it about a dynasty. He chose the word, and I love the word. Keep the words coming. But ultimately you are judged on your actions. That is a great quote. Yeah. Superman. That would be a great Superman ad right there for that's a full on. Okay, we talked about NWO. That's a full on Hulkamania right there by Connor Hellebuyck. The dynasty is around the corner, and he rips the Hulkamania shirt open. Okay, we're here to help with the marketing right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'll go back to it and I'll say it. I think that I love the confidence. And like I said, this is a guy, you know what? Here, I'm not going to say I would have said that, but Sean Reynolds in 2016 or 17 could have heard Connor Hellebuyck say that he was going to be a Vezina Trophy winner, and maybe I would have said the same thing. And maybe I would have been here poo-pooing it and saying, you don't say that until you've shown what you can do and whatever, right? Maybe I would be saying the exact same thing. And you know what? Hopefully, hey, let's everyone write down your receipts at home right now, because if 5 years from now the Winnipeg Jets have won 3 of the next 5 cups, you can say, Renny, you said that was a bad idea, and you can cram it down my throat, just like
it's a steel trap, right? It's a steel trap here, brother. I've got you covered.
Receipts, but I want the people at home to do the same thing, because, like I said, we should hold people accountable here. We should here, Wrench Doozer. This is a little more. Hellebuyck saying if you owe Lotto Max numbers, because if he calls that, then this is, like someone said, Nostradamus. He knows what's going on.
Amazing.
Should we save coach talk for tomorrow?
No, I mean, we can get to it in a little bit, but what do you think from what the other core pieces said? I mean, Andrew Kopp certainly reinforced his belief, and
well, I mean, I hear Andrew Kopp, and I'm thinking,
he's committed. I've been telling you this all year. Right?
Yeah. So, Ken, just quickly, I mean, it's funny. I felt like I caught Dylan Demelo off guard with the Seattle talk. But sure. Was that question? I mean, I almost felt like I was the only one thinking that, but. Is this not something? I know you've talked about trades and such, but the way things are going to line up, aren't they going to have to expose either Demelo or Stanley if there's no trade in the works? Right. Isn't that what we're looking at here?
Well, I mean, that's what it sort of seems like to me, but I mean, I understand this is a little bit more of the recency bias special here. Logan Stanley scores 2 goals in the final game, and I mean, Logan Stanley, hey, no bigger backer than Logan Stanley, even before he got to the NHL, than me. In terms of him eventually becoming an NHL player. However, there are receipts also for that. But here's the other part. I mean, who was missing from the Jets lineup when the defense crumbled in the second round? Dylan Demelo. He played one shift. So I don't see how, yes, the Jets have invested a lot in Logan Stanley, and they hope to keep him in the lineup. But Dylan Demelo played on the top pairing, right? Dylan Demelo played on the top pairing of the Winnipeg Jets. Josh Morrissey played his best hockey of the season beside Dylan Demelo. So I don't know how you can say Dylan Demelo won't be protected. I'm not saying you. I'm using the royal you, because we know this is a debate between Jets fans, whether it's who has the higher ceilings and everything. Yeah, I get it. And the other part is the uniqueness of Logan Stanley being a big, strong guy that you just don't see a lot of 6'7" players. I get it. I mean, are the Jets hoping privately that it's Mason Appleton who gets chosen? I mean, they don't want to lose Appleton either. But, I mean, we've talked about this before. If the Jets were having trouble with their depth, can they afford to lose a defenseman? Well, if they do, they're definitely going to have to go out and get somebody in free agency. Yes, we know there's going to be room required for Ville Heinola and Dylan Samberg and keeping Stanley if they can. But we're just talking, what have we been talking about for 2 years? How tough it is to find a top 4 defenseman. I cannot see for 1 second how all of a sudden the guy who is under contract for 3 more years at a reasonable sum of $3 million is not going to be protected. The guy who signed here and committed here. I mean, a lot of people won't like the comparison, but it's very similar to Toby Enstrom. Yes, were there some consequences? Did the Jets maybe miss out on Nick Suzuki because they kept Toby Enstrom because of that familial attitude, and because here's a guy who signed long-term and had a no-trade clause? Yes, he waived it, but they still made a deal to protect him. I mean, that matters in a market like Winnipeg where it's tougher to attract free agents. You got one that's signed for 4 years. Now, less than a year later, you say, thanks for your service, but we're not going to protect you. That has far-reaching ramifications. And I understand it's professional sports and you need to be careful in terms of your emotional investment. The Jets are also emotionally invested in Logan Stanley. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be. They absolutely should be. But you need to be careful. No, you can't teach size, but be careful what you wish for. That's why I said, I know, Sean, you disagree with me, but I think they will be going out of their way to try and keep both Logan Stanley and Dylan Demelo. I don't know what that price tag is. Will it be similar to what they paid in 2017 on the Vegas deal? That's what I cannot wait to find out. Does Ron Francis exert the same leverage as George McPhee and Kelly McCrimmon did? Or do a lot of teams just say, you know what, sucks to lose a good player, but take this player? I mean, there's so much on the horizon on that front. We can probably have, and maybe as I say it out loud, we'll have a Seattle expansion show at some point. But like right now, I said that this is what I'm saying, Nick. I think that Logan Stanley has high upside. I think that eventually he can be a second pairing defenseman. But I would be protecting Logan Stanley I would be protecting Dylan DeMello based on everything that I saw. But let's see what happens. Let's see what the creativity is. I still firmly believe they find a way to have both Dylan DeMello and Logan Stanley in their top 6 defense next year. And how they do that, that's up to Kevin Cheveldayoff.
And see, I think that's going to be really, really expensive to do, because if we take a look at the deal that the Jets made to keep 13
to 24 and a 4th round pick.
Right. And it ends up being Nick Suzuki, and it ends up costing you a lot when you see what Nick Suzuki has turned into as quickly as he has. I'm not discounting what Christian Vesalainen is going to turn into, but it ends up costing you most definitely. I just think that in that situation, the player, and you've touched on this, the player that was going to be coming back the other way was one that Vegas wasn't even sure if they were going to show up. So that is one of the lesser costing deals.
I agree. Yeah.
That teams made at that time to keep their players in the fold. This time around, it's significant players. Like I think if you're looking at that, to your point, if they think they can get Dylan DeMello, you get a top 4 defenseman who's extremely solid, now is under contract for a number of years. That's massive value to get. If you get Logan Stanley, you're getting a guy who's young, who's shown a ton of upside, who did what he did. Your lasting memory of him is what he does in Game 4 of that series. So you know he's the kind of guy who gets up for big games like that.
For sure.
I'm at the point where it's almost, if everything was just left as it was, protecting 7 guys and protecting 3 guys, I'm thinking the defenseman gets picked over Appleton all day long. That's what I think personally. But I do think, I mean, we've already kind of talked about the idea of, Gus rolling into the lineup next year, and some of those defensemen that are going in. Those are the guys it's going to take to keep the guys that we're talking about, right? And it's funny because, and we're going to get into this conversation here. I'm going to use Scott Billeck's line that he always loves to use, is keep kicking the can down the road. This seems to me to be one of those perfect situations where if they decide not to make that trade, it's kicking the can down the road, because you're losing Stanley, who looks like he's going to step in and be really good next year, or you're losing Demelo on a defense core that's already weak and needs to be tweaked and needs to be built up. And you're doing so to keep your young guys that are going to be good, 2-3 years from now, right? And it's the perennial kicking the can down the road idea that is going to be problematic for the Jets.
But it's not kicking the can down the road, because if a team is already in search of a top 4 defenseman, how can you allow a potential for top 2 pairing defenseman out the door? Now you're looking for 2. Right? You're looking for 2 of them. So that's why I say you're right. It might cost them something, but I mean, that's the other part. There are also going to be a number of potential opportunities in the marketplace with the pandemic season, with COVID, with lost revenues. We saw it last year with Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who ended up not wanting to, or actually he didn't get traded, right? I mean, it was out there. So some guys with high salaries may be available, because those teams are going to be going into rebuild mode because they lost so much money this year. Now you can't afford to pay that guy that money. Can you leverage that kind of a situation into helping the back end if you're the Winnipeg Jets? I mean, we keep hearing about Vince Dunn. I mean, he may be available. Who's available? When are they available? Is it after? Can you get a guy later on? I don't think the Jets want to wait until the trade deadline, but they need to upgrade their defense now. So that's why I say I have a hard time believing that they want either one of those guys to go, because they're already looking to improve the defenseman.
All right. Good stuff, Kenny. We want to, like I said, we want to remain accountable to our viewers, and they've been holding us accountable here today, no doubt. So that's why we're going to bring back Scott Billeck from the Winnipeg Sun and Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press, because they were with us as we did the
Where's the music? Give him the music.
That's
we don't have the
flicking
music.
the can. That's flicking the can.
I'm not going to get up and kick it.
Okay.
Come on, Scott.
We need the NWO music right now coming in here. We got the, or maybe it's more. This group might be a little more like the Four Horsemen back in the NWA days. Never mind the NWO days.
Never mind, Kenny. My heart's racing. I came on in the back room, and that was right when Kenny was just, I don't know what you guys were talking about just prior to, but he was giving her going. My heart's still trying to slow down here. So I was waiting to wake up, but someone needs to wake up.
Someone has a new name for us right here. Perfect.
Yeah, that is perfect.
There's a good sign for that one, too. That's not appropriate for your show, though.
Family show. That's right. Family show.
All right, guys. We've talked about it a little bit before. It's getting a little bit heated. Definitely, we shared our thoughts on Mark Scheifele, and the chat room let us have it. But we're going to start with you, Jeff. Give me an idea of what you saw yesterday during the Winnipeg Jets garbage bag day and the thoughts that they had coming out of it.
I saw a guy who was extremely frustrated to have to answer a question about his boss and decided to take it in a completely different direction. So to me, look, I mean, I said this yesterday on Winnipeg Sports Talk Radio with Huss. I was like, I get it. Like he's a guy who's frustrated. He just lost, his team just lost out in the playoffs. He had a hit that he clearly disagrees with, cost him his time playing for them. So he just was looking for an opportunity to let it go. And whether or not I agree with his comments, I mean, some I do, some I don't. One I particularly agree with was his comment about Winnipeggers and grinding for every inch and being great people. So hopefully that helps out the comment section here a little bit. But, I at the end of the day, it's a guy who's frustrated, and he's not entirely incorrect. Like, there were people who were counting the Jets out. There were people who were counting out the Jets at the beginning of the season. There were people who were counting the Jets out at the end of the season, and for good reason. So, the people who didn't predict the Jets making the playoffs, I mean, I was one of those guys. I don't know what the rest of the panel is here. I had them at fourth, hovering in as a bubble team to get in based on the fact that they had done nothing to address their defense from the previous year, and they had got into the preliminary round of the playoffs based on points percentage. Like, it, to me, that was kind of where you felt they were going to be, was kind of hovering around that spot. And then, when people were doubting them heading into the playoffs, it was built on the fact they had lost 7 games in a row and like 9 of 10 during 12, a stretch there. And 9 of 12 to end. And it was 9 and 10 before they reeled off those 2 victories at the end there. And it was based on the fact that the Edmonton Oilers I need to get stopped. Like, whenever I raise my voice, it's a big issue, right? Like, I'm some angry man here. Like, it's my childhood, damn you. So anyway, my thing is that prediction that they were going to lose in the first round was built on what we had seen, including 6 losses straight to them. So at the end of the day, I mean, Mark can get angry that, media counted him out, or that everybody seems to want, the Montreal Canadiens, Edmonton Oilers, and Toronto Maple Leafs in the next round. But the fact is guess what? Nobody has a bigger say in it than the players. So here's where we are, talking about the end of the season.
Well, hold on a second. I've got to back up on that. He was answering a question about his boss, and he went in a different direction. I asked that question. I don't ever remember asking.
Was it you that asked that? No, I thought you said the media. The
question that he responded.
No, that was Mike. No,
it was Mike.
No, but the question where he initially responded. Oh, so you're talking. I was talking about.
I thought you were talking about going after the media and the stuff. That was the other
the media.
Because I thought that's when he was most fired up, right? Like, that's when he was kind of taking no prisoners. So I apologize that it wasn't. It was your question. I thought it was that because I felt like that was the most play out of it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's so
yes, that's a different guy, but
that's Ric Flair.
Scotty,
come on.
Yeah.
Sorry, big just safe plug there. If you didn't see it on A&E, watch the Roddy Piper biography.
Awesome.
Tremendous, just tremendous.
What a guy. I met him. That's one of the things about this job. It's funny. He's one of the coolest guys I met, right? Like, you meet guys from your childhood, and I always remember watching Roddy Piper growing up. That was awesome. Scott, let's get this back on track here. The Jets are the ones that tell us all the time that they don't give a rat's ass what the media says about them. They clearly do. After what we heard from that, like, going on around, like, that's the one thing I don't understand. Why do they care so much? And the misplaced kind of idea of it, I think, is like, we're all the guys on the call, and we're all the guys who said that for the most part. I don't know if everyone here did, but I had the Jets making the playoffs. I know Kenny had the Jets making the playoffs.
Yeah,
did you too?
Fourth. Yeah,
you had them fourth.
We all had them in the playoffs. Like, I don't understand where it comes from. They just they get headlines. I'm sure half of them probably read the stuff that we write. Like, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. I mean, I think Jeff said this before. The number one guy that that's Googling Mark Scheifele is Mark Scheifele, right? Somebody's made that joke.
Whoa! If you're gonna quote me, my thing is, in professional athletes, if they're not playing hockey or playing video games, they're Googling their name. That's the.
There we go. But here's the thing, right? Like, I don't understand. Yesterday, like, I'm listening to a bunch of guys complain about the media. Not everybody. Mark Scheifele. I think Blake might have said a thing or two. But these are the 2 biggest names, maybe leaders on this team, and they're more concerned about what we're saying than what they're doing on the ice. And that's a problem, right? Like, I mean, when we're living rent-free in their head, and they're more concerned about that, or at least more concerned about talking about that in the media than what they're going to do next year to figure out how to not look like a sad sack team like they did in Game 4 and pretty much that whole round, that's a problem. I mean, I don't really know any other way to put it. I mean, and there's not much more to say on it. The thing is, if Mark can't figure it out in his head that it's not the media that
Effie.
If Mark can't figure out in the head that it's not the media that makes the decisions on the ice, it's his team, then he has a massive problem. And that's a problem that runs deeper than hockey, and he needs to figure it out. And like, everybody talks about, like, oh, it's always the media's fault that guys get run out of town, blah, blah, blah. No, like, that's just so far from the truth. Like, it doesn't happen. I mean, the reason why Patrick Laine ran from the town wasn't the media. The reason why Jacob Trouba ran from Winnipeg wasn't the media. Like, I mean, I don't get the whole, I don't know. I just thought there was, like, here's a guy who was supposed to be a mature NHL player kind of crying yesterday about, oh, nobody likes us, nobody picks us to win or whatever. Well, here's the reality of it. in a world where hockey is very much now based on analytics, or at least a lot of what we see in hockey, how we talk about the game, how we look at the game, how we analyze the game is based on analytics. The Jets are not good at analytics. And so what you saw in the second round, which was what you probably would have saw in the first round if Connor Hellebuyck doesn't put up a 950. Connor Hellebuyck did not put up a 950 in the second round, and so this is what happens to the Jets. Like, they are a team that plays on a knife's edge every game that they go out. They're not a dominant team. They're not a bottom-feeding team. They can win games. They can lose games. But, well, you can say what you want about analytics and sucking. I mean, the point is, for the last 2.5 years, the Jets have been terrible analytically. They've been one of the worst teams in expected goals. What do you want me to say? I mean, this is what it says, and it shows up. So it's not like this is all just like smoke being blown up people's asses. I obviously I can say rat's ass. So, but
family show here, family show here, Scott.
Well, you're the host. But anyways, I mean, my point is, like, the trends here. So yes, the argument is, the Jets made the top 8. That's great, awesome. The trend here goes beyond what the Jets did this playoff season, and the trend has slowly been going down, and that's part of the issue. And so we are where we are now with this team, and something needs to change. That's my opinion. I wrote about it. I've heard both sides from it about it, but it is what it is. I mean, I just think that Mark Scheifele went on a tirade yesterday, and there was no reason for him to do that. This is a guy who was already, he's worried about people think about him, yet he still hasn't apologized for the hit. So that's part of another issue too. But Mark's just digging the hole deeper for himself, in my opinion.
Yeah, just one quick one there. Yeah, of course. This is all important for us all to all remember, because we've all had these conversations personally during the pandemic, let alone having 2 playoff series taken away from you. Yes, he needs to be accountable for the hit, for sure. But this is a guy in the prime of his career. I said this before you came on, Scott and Jeff. In the prime of his career, he's played 3 periods and 3 shifts in two years of the prime of Mark Scheifele's career. So I understand, like, a lot of that is coming from frustration. I think a lot of it has come. I mean, sure. I'm not blaming this on COVID, but we've all had our COVID moments, and I think the only difference is that we have these conversations privately. Mark Scheifele chose to air them out publicly.
Yeah. Well, it's not like I come out on your show and say, "Oh, my game story sucked tonight because I was feeling sick. Blame Kenny." Kenny was talking.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that it's the frustration element. We asked why he had no reason to. He's frustrated. That's why.
I can respect that he's frustrated, right? There's nothing wrong. I think a lot of people can respect that, but it's the way that you go about it that loses respect for him, and I think that's the problem at the moment.
One other thing about the analytics in the Montreal series, and I'm not trying to come on here and say the Jets were in the series, because they weren't. No, hang on, Scott. A top line center and a top pairing defenseman were out of the game. So that's a big difference between round 1 and round 2. Yes, the goals saved above expected were lower, but they were also playing without 2 of their most important players. So naturally that would have some impact. And I'm not letting them off the hook. The Jets needed to play better. All we heard about was how much depth they had. The depth did not deliver. 6 goals in 4 games is not a special delivery. But right? That's not getting it done.
In the first round, the analytics sucked too. They just had Connor.
Here, I just want to say this to get back to Scheifele's comments. This is the thing about it that I think is interesting. One, like I said, the majority of the local media thought that they were going to make it. We know the team well. I'll say this time and time again. I thought that they had, their defense was an issue. I thought that they overcame that issue for a lot of the year. I expected them to, because they're that team. The one thing I think about the Jets is they always seem to be able to pull on the rope at the same time. So, but I mean, regardless, if he wants to focus in on what the national media said, I know a lot of the people in the national media didn't believe him, but we also know, Kenny, that Spec had them coming out of
first.
The Edmonton guy had them first coming out of the division, right? So it's not like as a whole they were disrespected. They chose to pick and choose people who didn't believe in them and disrespect them. And then to me, it seems strange. He chooses to kind of rub their nose in that at the end of the year. But it's like, this isn't a team that won the Stanley Cup.
Yeah,
this is a team that got to the playoffs in a division where one team wasn't really going to have a chance and did really, really well in the Ottawa Senators, and two other teams that kind of fell apart. So they make it, and I'm not, by no means am I discounting their accomplishment. They finished third. They finished ahead of Montreal, who's going on now. So I'm not discounting their accomplishment. But, I mean, they end up getting to the second round against an Edmonton team, which everyone can see is a very flawed team. They've got two really great players, but they are a flawed team. So I just don't get that. And it's kind of back to what I said at the beginning of Scheifele almost embracing, and people talking about it in the chat room, Scheifele almost embracing the heel role. Like, he's kind of thumbing his nose at people for not believing them, and his proof of, it's like that meme where it shows the guy like grabbing the girl, putting the medal around his neck, and like busting out the champagne and biting the medal, and then you pull out and see that he finished like 7th place or something like that. Like, what's he celebrating? What parade is he planning? That they beat the Edmonton Oilers and then got roundly swept and out analytic to a terrible degree by the Montreal Canadiens? It just seems like poor form to say, we got you guys. You guys thought this and we got you. It's like, you made it to the second round. Like, that's good and you should be proud about that. But I don't think it's something you should be pulling out the bullhorn and telling people suck it afterwards. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's it. Hang the banner now then. First round champions. Put it up there and then that's it, right? I don't know. I don't get the idea behind it, but.
Let's get into, guys, the support of the coach that we saw afterwards, because when I said that, I thought that the players were coming out and roundly endorsing Paul Maurice afterwards, the response on Twitter was a lot of people saying, oh yeah, well, hey, what do you think of your boss, Sean? What are you going to say, right? And I get them saying that, but I think that what we saw goes beyond people just putting themselves in a normal spot. Am I wrong to think that? Am I wrong to think that the Jets showed a very strong front in supporting Paul Maurice yesterday?
Yeah, for me, I'll take this one first. So I understand people saying, yeah, sure, you're not going to rip your boss publicly, but to think that the guy that was benched on Hockey Night in Canada by this coach should not be asked about his opinion about him is ridiculous. Of course he should be asked. Right? I mean, people are saying, well, Mark disagreed publicly with the coach. So good on Mark for doubling down and saying he now views it as a learning experience. But to think that we shouldn't ask him and that you should only ask players that aren't playing about the coach, well, most of those players weren't available, first and foremost. Secondly, if you're part of the leadership group, it matters what you think about the coach, right? That's why you ask those players. It's not just us asking about those players. Kevin Cheveldayoff has to know how those players feel about the head coach. Otherwise, he has to consider making a change. So that's why they're asked about it.
Guys, Scott,
I'd pick up on that. I don't know if the players' answers about the coach are necessarily needing.
No, not publicly. I mean, to Chevy. They have to tell him how they feel before they decide what to do.
And just to bounce off your thing is you also create the window if he does have something to say about the coach, right? Like, to not ask, you won't get that answer. Of course, you're going to get that. And my comment earlier about that was, of course, players don't love being asked that, because majority of players, even if they do have an issue with their boss, aren't going to publicly probably say it. But you need to, you need to ask the question. And, they did put up a front. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that Paul Maurice, or any of our minds, I imagine in this square here, think that the Jets don't like Paul Maurice. I think a majority of the team, or more importantly, for Paul Maurice's job security, the most influential players on the team, like Paul Maurice, Blake Wheeler, Mark Scheifele, Paul Stastny, like, these guys were glowing things about them because they kind of get what they want out of them. The thing with Paul is that he's a player's coach, right? He's evolved over time, and he's a player's coach that, in an era where you kind of need a player's coach with COVID and everything going around, those are very valuable skills for a coach to have, is an ability to reach their players and to treat them like people. There's not a lot of guys in that dressing room. I'm not saying it's 100%, but there's not a lot of guys in that dressing room that don't know where they stand with this team. They don't have to like it, but they more often than not know it. The problem is, whether you want to point to analytics or whatever, is the systems whatever systems that are being put in place for this team either aren't the right systems for this team and the personnel that they have, or they're just not doing them. Because what we saw in that second series in particular, and certainly part of this first series, but more so in the series against Montreal, was absolutely nothing in all ends. It seemed impossible for them to break out of their zone. There was because they didn't have any clean breakouts. They hardly had any transition game any game through the neutral zone, and they had no sustained pressure, and their power play wasn't any good. So where are we getting to a point where you start looking at the coach who controls those kind of things and isn't just a guy in everybody's corner?
Sure, but they were a top 5 power play for most of the year, right? But they had a terrible run at the end, 2 for 30.
100%. I meant more in the playoffs here.
No, for sure.
And their PK was top 10 too. So special teams to a lesser degree, and I would argue that Paul Maurice isn't the special teams guru on this team. So it's like, to me, it's the systems that Paul Maurice puts in place and the makeup that he wants out of his team. So I think that's where you get to a point where you're like, okay, yeah, you're a great players coach. What about the systems that that seem to be non-existent?
One quick one before you go, Scotty. BA split. No, that's not true. Paul Stastny said numerous times this year, I've had bad coaches. Blake Wheeler said yesterday, I've had bad coaches where your eyes gloss over when the message is being delivered. So yes, they do occasionally publicly say that they don't like the coach.
Yeah, I personally think if anyone in this chat room or on the internet who's been saying, yeah, no, they just have to say those things. Like, there's a difference between saying, yeah, like, I like Paul Maurice, he's a good coach, things are good, and then pulling out specific examples of things that he did this year that you are impressed by. That's what I saw happening. You don't do that. Like, if you're gritting your...
Nice. Must be nice being wrong a lot.
If you are gritting your teeth and having to say something nice about your coach, you do that and you get in and out of that question as quick as you can. You don't grit your teeth and then start pulling out specific examples that you can pick up throughout the year to talk about what a great job he did. It's not... And every player did that to me. For the most part, every player did that. And then there was a lot of other people who were responding to, the comments that I made on Twitter about this and saying, well, ask the young players what they think about it. Ask the guys who aren't getting any ice time. And, we all love that meme that Billy Hainela threw out of doing the Bernie sitting back in the chair. And Hainela, I mean, he has every right to feel that way. And I think people say that. But here's the fact of the matter is, of course, those kids are going to be frustrated. I'm thinking that they may say that, but that doesn't matter. The rookies or the prospects don't dictate what's happening with the coach on the team. The guys like Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler, who are giving him a rounding endorsement, do. Their say matters. Believe me, the general manager is sitting down and consulting Blake Wheeler on a move like that to see how he feels about it. They're not calling up Gus and saying, Gus, do you think we should make this move? That's not happening. So I get it, and I think a lot of it is because there's a lot of people out there that we know in the social media world, on Twitter. There's a lot of Jets fans that want to see the Jets move on from Paul Maurice. But to say that the players are just saying this because they have to, that's wishful thinking to me. Scott, do you agree?
Yeah. My problem is that regardless of what the players say about the coach, like, the GM has to figure out even if the players like the coach, is the coach actually the guy that's putting them over the top, right? Like, we're 7.5 years in to Paul Maurice's era here, and I'm not sure when this team has been put over the top. Yes, they went to the Western Conference Final. I get that. A year later, they fell from grace, right? And since then, they've been coming. There is an argument here that Paul Maurice has not been given some of the tools that he's needed. The counter argument to that is, with the tools that he has been given, he hasn't always used them properly. Jordy Ben over Heinola. We can go back to Hendricks over whoever, Thompson over Gustafsson, all this stuff. Why was there a platoon for Logan Stanley at the end of the year when it was obvious that he was the best choice? Why is Blake Wheeler spending most of the season, the first quarter of the season, third of the season, whatever, still on the top line with cracked ribs? Why haven't they figured out when Blake Wheeler's time is to move down the lineup and maybe let somebody else take over that top line spot? I think these are some of the issues that fans have with this team, is that it's not just, everybody likes the player. It's like, who is the coach holding the players accountable? And I think that's one of the big questions that's a question mark, really, right? Like, there's a good tweet, I think Wino tweeted out, or somebody retweeted at least. Barry Trotz went to the New York Islanders. New York Islanders weren't a great team when he went there. Their biggest problem was defensive hockey. They turned into a defensive juggernaut. Now they've won 5 playoff series since they've been there. The Washington Capitals have won 0. 6 now, last night. And the Capitals have won 0 since he went. Like, does it matter? How much does it matter? It does matter. But what is the balance between how much the players like a coach and how much the players will play for a coach when that coach is leading them to the promised land? And I think that's part of the problem. Sure, the Jets get into the first round. I mean, it's debatable whether the Jets would have either been in the playoffs at all over the past 2 years without Connor Hellebuyck. The counter argument to that, every team has to have a good goalie if they're going to go somewhere. But the Jets have a good goalie that's, in my opinion, kind of getting squandered right now because they haven't really built around him. Again, it's a multifaceted issue here. I mean, there's 2 things, because I don't think Kevin Cheveldayoff has always given Paul Maurice what he needs. I mean, where is the second line center when Patrick Laine was here? They never got it. Where's the reinforced defense? That they've needed now for the past 2 seasons. That's never came. Right? So where is that? So like, I mean, it sort of goes hand in hand here. You can't blame one over the other necessarily, because they're kind of they're kind of married together in that way. But there just hasn't been enough from both, in my opinion, that has allowed this team to actually play to its strengths. Like, I mean, I don't want to be the host here, but what is Winnipeg's identity? And if you can tell me what their identity is, then why haven't they gone out and gotten those players for it? My argument is they don't have one. And Kevin Cheveldayoff needs to figure out what he wants his team to be first before he can go and get those players. And I don't think they're just trying to find plug holes. Like, does anybody think a top 4 defenseman fixes this team? Right? Like, I don't know if that just magically fixes
certainly
this
helps.
Team. Of course it helps, Kenny, but does that fix the defensive woes, the defensive breakdowns? I don't know, because I mean, it's still a 6-man thing out there, right? There's still 6 guys on the ice. So yeah, if you had a Shea Weber playing a pile of minutes, sure, but are you still going to have defensive issues with guys that aren't as good for their positions? Like, I think you can still get by. I mean, if you look at some of the other teams, you don't have to have the best, defensive guys, but sometimes it can be a sum of parts, right? So I don't know. I mean, the system either needs to be better or the players need to be better, but neither is better at the moment, and that's why they're having problems. So
the system, a quick counter to that, Scotty, and they're valid points for sure. So in 2017-18, was Paul Maurice a poor coach, or did they just have an exceptional roster? Because the system worked pretty well when he had 4 lines that he can play and 6 defensemen, plus
That's
a goalie who is becoming elite.
I feel like he's using the same system then that he's using now.
Oh, but they're not playing the same way.
But not the same way, but they have different personnel. And it's like why is this team constantly defensively driven with the way with the makeup of their team? Like, why is it all of a sudden going into a series against, it worked for Edmonton because you knew you'd be outmatched by 2 juggernaut scorers. Why in Montreal is it playing to a 1-0 game is the goal?
Well, they couldn't score, right? And that's the problem. You're right. I mean, they weren't great at defending, but they had to score. But they only scored 6 goals.
But that
3
was
goals in 3
that was
games.
kind of their game plan, was to be patient, to wait it out, to wait out the Montreal Canadiens, who wait out teams better than most teams in the NHL. They wanted, like, for a team that constantly said day in and day out that it didn't matter what the other team played, that it was all about our game, to go into that second round series and try to play a chess game with Montreal and end up playing checkers is just, it's insane.
Hold on, I want to respond to that. Okay, so and this is why, and I've said this before, I do not think there was a path to the Winnipeg Jets winning that series, because I hear what you're saying, Jeff, but here's the counter to that. Okay, so they went in and they decided they couldn't outscore the Edmonton Oilers, so they were just going to grind them, right? And it worked, right? They pulled it off. They win a 4-game series. I know the analytics weren't the best, but they pull it off, right? So then they go up against the Montreal Canadiens, and here's their choice. They can either continue the kind of hockey that they were just playing and try and outgrind a team that I think in the end we found out was a superior grinding team, and that's why they lost. Or their other option was to say, okay, let's open up our offense and see what happens with that, except they'd just seen what Montreal had done to superior scorers in Mitch Marner and in Austin Matthews. You know, like,
are you saying Paul got outcoached?
I don't think he got outcoached. I do not think that there was a path with Montreal playing how they are. I'm one of the people in the camp who says that I think that Montreal got disrespected. I think that everyone turned around and thought the Toronto Maple Leafs choked. Everyone said the Toronto Maple Leafs choked. I don't buy that. I think the Montreal Canadiens got to the exact game that we saw, because if you take a look at games 1, 2, 3, and 4 against the Winnipeg Jets, go back and look at games 7, 6, and 5 against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they are carbon copies of games of each other. Montreal got to their blueprint, and no one has figured out how to beat that blueprint. And so I'm not saying that Paul Maurice got out coached, although I do think Paul Maurice didn't have an answer. But did he have the roster to have an answer, right? Did you have the puck-moving defenseman who could hold on to the puck and skate it out of the system rather than try to pass? If you think Billy Heinola was going to win that series, Scott,
I'm not saying he was, but why didn't they give him a chance?
It doesn't matter. I'm not going down that road. Stop what you're doing. You're all right. You're right. You're not the host, and you're not
exactly.
Totally
wait your turn.
This to me, I don't think there was a path for the Jets, because their path was, one, either outgrind the Canadiens the way they had just outground a team like the Oilers that had no grind. So they went up and thought they could try and outgrind the Canadiens, and they couldn't. That's what we found out. But what was their option, Jeff? To go and try and open things up and be offensive and get murdered the way that Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner did, and combining for just one goal?
Well, I mean, if you're asking me, like this is my point. Like, we're talking about the Montreal Canadiens as if they're the Colorado Avalanche. Like, yeah, we saw them play pretty well against Toronto. What are we saying that Toronto? Or yes, is Austin Matthews? Okay, first of all, Mitch Marner doesn't really score goals, so we're not talking about a guy. We're talking about a setup man for the most part. Secondly, you had, yes, Austin Matthews is a great scorer. Jason Spezza looked like he was vintage Jason Spezza against that. So wasn't there cracks in that series that you could have exploited if you were the Winnipeg Jets? If you claim to be a deep line of forwards, is there not are you telling me the only thing the Winnipeg Jets could have done to win was to try to grind and battle out against that team? Are you suggesting that's the only way to victory for the Winnipeg Jets? That's putting way too much credit on Montreal Canadiens, in my opinion.
No, I'm saying neither plan would have worked. That's why I'm saying I don't think there was a path to victory for as the Winnipeg Jets are constructed with their defense that I think was exposed in that series, and not so much in the Canadian scoring, but in their ability to move the puck and move it out of the zone. I think as the Jets were constructed with the Montreal Canadiens getting to their game and playing their game, I don't think either was a path to victory. I don't think they could outgrind them, and I don't think they could outscore them. And I think Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner getting shut down, and a deeper Toronto Maple Leafs team getting shut down offensively by the Canadiens is a perfect example of that.
There was one way, Sean. The Jets needed to win the special teams battle. That's the way that they get into this series. But not only did they not win it, they got smoked, and it's 6-1. And three of those goals were shorthanded. Yes, one was into an empty net, but in consecutive games where the Jets were actually in the game, in games 2 and 3, and in game 3, I would say they were gifted a too many men penalty and then gave up a shorthanded goal. Never mind the one that was the only goal scored in game 2 for the GWG. The Jets needed to be better at special teams. That was their solution when their offensive well went dry. They had to get something on that front, and they could not find a way to get it. And not only that, then they gave up 3 goals, which was the critical blow.
I want to hear more from you, but this is a perfect time for this question. NLCCS. So what do you think is the solution, Sean? Like, I think that the Jets from the beginning of the season, their roster construction is not proper. And someone brought it up earlier on, and we've debated this in the past. I think all 4 of us have. And I keep saying this. If the Jets are so deep up front, and we talk about them being extremely deep up front, and Ken, you were talking earlier in the show about having a $750,000 defenseman on your top pairing, then there's clearly an imbalance there. And the job of a general manager is to take an imbalance. And someone said this, there's no such thing as a perfect roster. I agree with that. You have to find a balance. So you've got a great goaltender, and you've got phenomenal depth and scoring up front, and you've got a defense that is clearly not a championship caliber defense. So what do? You take some of your strengths in areas that you have strengths, whether it's prospects or whether it's depth of scoring that you have up front, and you switch it around and you move it around and you build a better defense. I'm going and saying it's as simple as this. The Jets did not have a defense to carry them deep in the playoffs, and I think everyone knows that. If you look at that, it's the reason everyone was upset the Jets didn't make a move at the trade deadline, because everyone knows they needed more.
Okay,
Yeah,
but
deeper than
again,
that, though.
how do you find the solution? So what we're just talking about, the Jets scored 6 goals in 4 games, 3 in the last 3. So if the solution to find the number one D-man is trade Kyle Connor, who's the leading goal scorer, then who's scoring the goals, right? I mean, it's easy to say, yes, go out and trade Kyle Connor to get the number one D-man. Does the number one D-man, is he young? Does he have term? Is he want to be in Winnipeg? I mean, this is not an easy thing to do. You're right. The Jets do need to add a top 4 defenseman. If they could add a top 2 defenseman, great, but it's going to come at a price. Look at the price that it took to get Pierre-Luc Dubois, and that didn't work out in this year, although I do like the way that he handled himself. And yes, some folks making fun of my defense of him. Hey, I've said it all along. Pierre-Luc Dubois needs to be better. I love the fact that he owned it, that he said he was going to be better, and that he needs to be better. Because guess what? If he's not better, his future is going to be vastly impacted by him not being better. And we'll check the receipts. I'll be shocked if he does not get back to the player he was. He was a good NHL player, an above average to really good NHL player for 3 seasons. But who are you going to trade? You're not trading Dubois, nor should you. You're not trading Kyle Connor because you have him for 5 more years, I think, at $7 million. So you're not trading Ehlers. So then how do you find that player, right?
So why? Why are you not trading any of those players? Because you could get a guy like Mike Hoffman and pay him far less money, and you could try and pick up scoring from there. If you trade Kyle Connor, people were complaining about it earlier on in the chat room, how Nick Ehlers was 7th in ice time on the team. You find a way to showcase that player more often, like we've been talking about all year. You just brought up the point. You try and get more out of Pierre-Luc Dubois. What's this team's problem? They need defense. They've got the potential to add offense into the lineup. Cole Perfetti is not that far down the line. There are scorers out there, like I said, a guy like Hoffman who you could go and pick up to try and bridge the gap.
Hoffman is not coming to Winnipeg, nor should he.
Fine, you know what I'm saying. You can go out and you can try and find someone who can pick up and be a short-time solution in
There's
that.
Winnipeg connection with Hoffman, whether you want him or not. Who cares? But
anyway, the point I'm trying to say is you can say you don't move any of those guys, and I don't think the Jets do. But what I do think the Jets do in the meantime is they try and bring guys up slowly, and it gets back to Scott's kicking the can down the road argument. If you want to address what's wrong with this team, it's clearly the defense needs to be better.
Right.
It needs to be better. So how do you figure that out? If you're top heavy on what you're paying the top end, then you said it, Ken. How much were they paying the third pairing of the Jets just a couple years ago when they had their best roster? Well, now they're not spending anything. They're not spending anything on their defense, right?
Right, but
so
they have
to find a way to take that money and invest it in the back end, which means you got to move guys because it's already locked up.
But yeah, their defense should be improved with Sandberg and Heinola. There will be some growing pains for sure, but I mean, this is what we talked about tons, Sean. Line up, Scott. What? It's not going to be. You don't think that Sandberg is going to make a bigger contribution than Derek Forbort did this year?
You guys have told me here that Heinola would have made no difference this year, but now you're saying next year he's going to just magically make a difference when he hasn't even played that much this year.
I never said
played
that
over 40 games.
I said if you're adding a bunch of young defensemen, you're doing what you talk about and kicking the can down the road.
Well,
That's why.
But here's the thing: all I'm hearing from Kenny is
to build up the back end.
Yeah, and all I'm hearing from Kenny is you can't trade this guy, you can't trade that guy. Well, if you can't trade anybody, then all you are doing is kicking the can down the road.
Well, that's not what I didn't say. You can't trade anybody. I just said you got to be careful. If you're trading someone with term who can produce, you got to find which NHL team wants to. Scott, which NHL team wants to trade a top 2 defenseman that has term and is in the prime of his career? I can't think of one.
Sure, yeah, I'm not saying that it's going to happen. But the problem
we're talking about solutions. That's all.
First of all, you talked about Dylan Demelo before we came on.
Finally, someone gave T. Will one of his messages up here about my wallpaper. Yes.
Hope the movie went well.
More Montreal boutique hotel room, but hey, you got there. It's good. I am a picker, though, so
I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying you have to be careful, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, but all the Jets are careful. There's no risk involved in what the Jets do.
Well, it's not true. They traded Patrick Laine. There's lots of risk involved in trading a second overall pick. Of course they did. They didn't have to trade him this year.
Of course. They didn't have to trade him this year, but they were going to eventually have to trade him. That was a
Okay.
done deal, Kenny. You already said that. So that was happening one way or another. The risk is trading players they don't have to trade to try and make their team better. Name one that they've done that. They haven't. So so Dylan Demelo gets played on the third pairing for much of the year, and then all of a sudden there's this epiphany that Dylan Demelo and Josh Morrissey are the best defensive pairing on this team, and Paul Maurice only finds out about it in game 50. I don't understand.
He didn't find out about it in game 50. He was trying to cover off the weaknesses in the defensive roster. He didn't want to take and put Logan Stanley. He didn't want to put Logan Stanley coming up into the lineup alongside Tucker Poolman and hang those guys out to dry. You have to put your guys in a position to succeed. So he brings a guy up and puts him with his second best defenseman so that he's not struggling, so that he's got a chance to succeed when he comes into the league.
I disagree. My problem is you went right back to that during the playoffs. So
because you were buying time for Logan Stanley to get his feet underneath him. Stanley had just like the first line was always going to get back together. That top pairing was always going to get back together for the playoffs. It's not. Do you really think that they brought him in for that? And last year, Paul Maurice used Josh Morrissey and Dylan Demelo as a top pairing, and then forgot that those guys played well together for the entire year, and suddenly rediscovered it right before the playoffs.
But why are you taking away from, like, here's what the Paul Maurice is doing. He's making it all weaker. He's making his roster weaker by doing that.
I disagree. I think you need to, like, I'm not saying that your overall point isn't valid. I'm saying that I think it's a couple things. It's one thing is that you like in a comment here, Demelo babysat the third pairing all year to bring them structure because they didn't, like, I get that you want to load them on the first pairing. You saw that. We can't predict the future. We can't look back and say how many games they won. The coach decided to put him on the third line thinking that they would get eaten alive on that third pairing, and it might lead to more losses. Whether you agree or disagree with it is different. I just think the ideology. The other part is with Ville, and I'm a big Ville Heinola fan. I think he's going to be, and you've said this before.
He's your top four solution.
He's your top four solution. He's going to be the guy. He's the closest thing you have to a top, defenseman in the system. So you don't want to get rid of him for any of those things. But the idea of bringing him in, I think the thing that you mentioned, Sean, earlier was the reason why Ville Heinola didn't get in wasn't just because Paul Maurice didn't think he was ready. I think a lot of the Jets teammates didn't think he was ready, the ones that had big voices. That's why Nathan Beaulieu's on this team. That's why certain guys get into the roster, is because there's veterans on this club that choose that put their input in.
Isn't that a problem, though, that you're playing?
I'm not saying, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm not.
I mean,
neither of us have the decision-making power. I'm just,
I know. Yeah.
And in terms of trading anyone, Mike, I mean, sure, if you are able to, like, if you're going to trade Kyle Connor, you better be damn sure that you got a top pairing defenseman under contract with term. That's all I'm saying. Kyle Connor's had 2 tough playoffs now in a row without Mark Scheifele, 1 extra attacker goal. Guess what? That's not good enough for a guy that Paul Maurice said was on the verge of becoming basically a top 10 player. I don't think it's from lack of effort or lack of trying. Kyle Connor puts the puck in the net like very few people do in the National Hockey League. But the production has to match the value. But having said that, I'm not out here saying, like, it's similar to Ehlers. When Ehlers didn't score, you still expected him to score because of his finishing ability. I would not trade Nikolai Ehlers. I think it's time for Nikolai Ehlers to be on the top line and on the top power play unit by next year. So that's why I don't trade Ehlers. I don't think you even think about trading Ehlers. If you're going to trade Kyle Connor, which I don't think they will, you better make sure you're not trading him for Bowen Byram. You need to trade for a guy who is a top pairing guy that can play 25 minutes, is young and under contract. And I don't see anyone in the NHL giving that player away, even for a guy who's as talented as Kyle Connor. Then we're back to solutions, right? I mean, so if you're not trading those two guys, then how are you going to get that player?
I was told by my agent I'm sounding grumpy and mean. So if I've been if I've been too heated, guys,
check your phone.
My apologies for that. But yeah. Anyway, what do we want to move on to?
We all the Ehlers point you made too about second line. We know why Ehlers is on the second line and the second line power play, right? Because
I know why. I'm just saying it's time for the Jets to make the next step. It's time next year for him to be given more responsibility.
It was time at points this year to make the second power play unit the first. So
Sure.
I mean, he's in a shooting position that two other players want that position are ahead of him in the depth chart, if you will. Not saying they should be, just saying they are.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying. It's time to find a different place then for him to fit in on that unit.
All right, so let's it's time we got to give credit where it's due. Let's revisit what we expected from this series. Scott, both you and I had what in
6 games
Canadiens?
Jets.
6 games Jets.
6 games Jets. Yeah.
Kenny?
That was wrong.
Yeah, same here. Yep.
Yeah. Well,
One quick thing I want to say about
I was 5. I had Jets in 5.
One thing I want to say about
Jeff
the Canadiens that we were talking about before. Most people thought that Dom Ducharme was going to be fired if they didn't beat the Leafs. So I think that we're talking about coaching a lot. You got to give the coach credit. I mean, and the other thing about Montreal, guys, Montreal was the best team out of the gate in the North and then went in a ridiculous tailspin that not very many people can figure out. So I think, sure, we've talked about coaching a lot. Dom Ducharme has done an awesome job at a time when a lot of people thought his job was in jeopardy. So that just goes back to the razor-thin margin. I just wanted to get that out there before we move on to the series itself.
Well, how much different would this discussion be if the Jets would have got swept in the first round, right? Like after that tailspin they went into. I mean,
fired. Yeah.
Let's ask this question. And sorry, I didn't do the final one. Jeff, your what was your pick in that series?
Before I said Habs and 6. Before Sandy and G, that's a great comment. She's he or she is both or whatever said.
This one here.
Has said that twice, and I think it's true. There's a hierarchy on this team. It's impenetrable. People are asking who the players were. I wasn't hiding it. It's Blake Wheeler and Mark Scheifele. It's not like a secret, right?
Yeah,
anyway, I had Habs in 6. I'm not going to take a ton of credit, guys.
Well, you were 2 games off. Why would you?
Sure. But I also said I also was doing it. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, you had the wrong team. So
Jeff, I hang on before you get rolling. I've got a news flash for you, and you know this because you've known Sean longer than I have. Yeah. Sean is always going to make a way. He's always going to deflect away from his own pick, and we're going to go back to that after Vegas cleans up the series tonight.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there you go. Back to life. No, I picked the Habs in 6. Because I was kind of leaning with the comment section about, picking the other team and result being, helping them out because I always pick the wrong whatever. So I just kind of lucked out in this situation. I, like many people, felt like the Jets were the favorites, right? What they were able to do, not only finishing higher in the standings, but they, the same things we used to make our predictions leading into the first series, I would have applied in the second series. The Jets' regular season record against Montreal, what they were able to do in the first round, the fact that Montreal had to go 7, the Jets were favorites. And that's ultimately, I believe, was their demise, is they couldn't point at anybody and go, you're saying we're crap. Everyone was saying how good they were, how surprising they were after that first thing. And then, they are who they are. So.
Well, guys, we should leave some meat on the bone. One of the reasons we wanted to bring you both back is because we love to revisit with the fans and be able to give you guys credit where it's due and shame where it's due. Scott Billeck and Ken Wiebe and Sean Reynolds, you guys blew it.
No shame in getting it wrong. I mean, hey, it's hard. It's a hard job to prick. If I was in the prediction,
take the shame.
If I was graded predictions, I'd be
rich.
A gambler, exactly.
Rich,
6-2 in the first round. I'm pretty happy, but now I need a Vegas win to be 2-2.
Exactly.
I'd buy shares in Kenny and Renny if I could do that.
Oh, hey, you know what we should be doing here? We should also be giving.
Are you guys selling these shares? Yeah. Or just don't get any decision power? We get to be part of it, or what?
We'll see. We'll see.
We should be giving credit to where it's due as well, because Jeff Hamilton also has was right about the New York Islanders. I was wrong in that series. I had Boston win. Now I had run the table on everything but the North Division until that happened. I had Tampa going on, and I still have Colorado going on. Ken's on the other side of that. But Jeff Hamilton is right with the Islanders, and you have them going to the Stanley Cup final, do you not?
I'm them winning. That was my team from the beginning. I didn't go and pick a bunch of series, yada, yada. Besides talking with the Jets, I just said I think the Islanders are going to win the Stanley Cup. That was
And I've got Colorado winning the Stanley Cup since the beginning of the season. But you know what is really interesting, we kind of have to touch on is, Ken, if Vegas wins tonight, the Final Four of this year has 3 of the last 4 from last year in it. It's, I mean, we're the more things change, the more they stay the same. But it's an Islanders Tampa Bay final. I covered that Eastern Conference final last season in the bubble, and really, I'm not saying that Dallas would have been there, but there had to be a different team in the Final Four because there had to be a Canadian representative. So really, 3 out of 4 is as good as it could have been compared to last year, and that's where we find ourselves. Anyways, gentlemen. Or Ken, you got something to say, don't you?
Well, no, we also have we've got to make an announcement there as well. But yeah, I mean, it shows how hard it is to win, and we're not writing out the Avalanche off. They could win tonight. They could win Game 7, and then we'll have a different discussion. But I mean, Kevin Biex has said it best. After Game 2, everyone was ready to award the Avalanche the cup, and they might not get out of the second round. Yeah. So this is a reminder. This is not a defense of anyone. It's just a reminder of how hard it is to win. Because if you rewound the tape a week ago or a week and a half ago, most people thought Colorado not only was advancing to the conference final, but that had already won the cup. So it's hard to get to 16 wins. Every team's trying to get there, and there's teams with better rosters that are having trouble getting there. So that's what the challenge is going into the offseason for the Jets, because not only now do you have to beat the team that you lost to, you're going back to the Central where you're going to have a highly motivated Colorado Avalanche team no matter what happens in the rest of the series, and you got a team like the Minnesota Wild who are an up-and-comer, came out of nowhere. I mean, look what happened to them. Everyone was writing them off. Now they're right back into the mix. You're going to have a hungry St. Louis Blues team that's pissed off about an early departure. You got a team in Arizona that thinks it's on the rise. Chicago made some big strides this year before kind of faltering down the stretch. I mean, it's going to be another fantastic. This is a big offseason on a lot of levels. We'll be talking about expansion. We'll be talking about free agency. We'll be talking about trades. And, maybe somebody gets traded that we did not anticipate. But fun days on the horizon. It's been great to do this with you guys throughout the year. And always good to talk about hockey for sure. We know there's a lot of passion, and the folks in the chat room, it's been awesome to have you along as well.
Yeah, Central Division is going to be a ride next year. I'm looking forward to it. I'm just going to ask this quickly from everyone because I think people are interested in this. Hammy, do you think the Habs have a chance next series?
In a word, no.
No,
I think
Scott?
no. I'd love to see it, but I just don't think so. No.
No,
Scott?
not the way. No, even if Colorado does come back, the way that Vegas and Colorado are playing is, it's we haven't seen it yet, right? We haven't seen the Canadian teams play any of the American teams, but just the hockey that you watch down there compared to what we've seen up here, yeah, I don't think so.
Ken?
I'd be careful with being so dismissive. I understand that the narrative is out there outside of our markets too. I think that the Habs are all the things we talked about. They're a deep team. They have some young talent. I'm not saying they're going to win the series, but they're not going to get cakewalked the way that some people do.
Good goalie too, right?
Good goalie can steal a game. Their special teams are on, and they have 4 lines. So it's going to be. We know it's a taxing series. Vegas got pushed to the limit by the Wild. They are going. They're being pushed to at least 6 by Colorado. Colorado could win in 7. We know this. So I don't think that it's a cakewalk for their opponent. I think ultimately that one of those 2 teams advances to the final, but I think that Montreal is going to give this series a big game, and also because of their young players. I mean, that's the one thing that we didn't really dive into. Suzuki and Kotkaniemi, and Caulfield. It wasn't just the older guys or the veterans, and their back end is going to make life difficult. For a lot of guys. I think the Habs will give them a series. I do think that ultimately the winner of Vegas-Colorado wins in 6, but I think that Montreal will not. I mean, Montreal will frustrate their opponent to a certain degree, much like they did against Winnipeg.
Yeah, I don't need to add on that. I agree with Ken. I think Montreal is going to surprise some people and how competitive they are in that series. I don't think they'll win it, but I think they'll make it a grind. I think they'll tire that team out, but I do not think they'll go on. I do think, though, that it's going to be an interesting series to cover, and that will be good for me because I'm off to Montreal to cover it when they're back in Montreal. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. You did an awesome job all year. We really appreciate it. Ken, you're always doing great work. as
Hey,
usual.
Hey, Sean, I hate to interrupt you on your closing at the end of this, but I wanted to express my thank you to the comment section too. This is a completely different experience that we're used to. We usually just talk one way with a host or whatever and yada, yada, but it's been an awesome experience to have them be involved. I love this show. I love the new formats that people are coming out and creating, giving opportunity to people to talk, and more importantly, to have those live comments, call us out on our crap if they need to, make fun of us, all that stuff. I think one of the beauty parts about being in this industry, and, we talk about players and we talk about, reactions to them. For the most part, we have a lot of thick skin. We like having fun. We're no different than them. We just have a bit better access and see a bit more and whatever. But overall, I think it's just been a terrific experience to be able to engage with fans in a completely different way that even a year ago we didn't even think about was possible. So awesome.
I'm going to chime in before Shawnee can fix that too, because I also want to thank the fans, but I also want to thank Kenny and Renny here. And part of that is, so most people know that I've had to cover COVID for the last 15 months. And I didn't play a huge role. Well, I wouldn't say a huge role. I didn't play a big role in the Jets coverage this year for the Sun because of that. And so this was my sanity for many nights this year. Just being able to come on, talk, interact with the fans, the flute thing, the Boston Red Sox hat, the shaking of the thing that I didn't even know I was doing the one night. I mean, like, there's so many memes that come out of this, right? But I mean, I think so. Yeah, obviously, I'm with Jeff 100%. I mean, I remember the first night being on this and trying to look at both screens, trying to be like a googly-eyed dog trying to watch two things at once. But yeah, no, I think for me, just personally, being able to be a part of this, and yeah, sometimes I get a little animated and whatever. I think that's what fans like too. I think they like that. I mean, I try and play to what people like and that sort of thing too. I mean, I'm pretty quiet. Well, no, Kenny wouldn't agree.
Keep the passion flowing, Scotty. Keep the passion flowing.
But that's it. I mean, that's part of it. It's been a release valve. I know that's one of the words that Rusin used yesterday. But for me, this has been that. So I appreciate both of you for having me on, and the chat, and Jeff for being on too. And I'm good.
Well,
I'm not trying to get emotional.
I'll tell you, we have you guys on because we love you guys. We respect the hell out of you. Scotty, you've been a real help down the stretch. I know, like you'd said, you weren't as prevalent in coverage as you wanted to be, but it allowed, at least for us, you to step in and while Ken was taking care of his business, kind of ride the train with me here. Jeff, you're entirely right. I've talked about our audience. They are the secret sauce to this show. The best thing about this is, like you said, having them call us out, having them direct our show, and just being able to connect with them. It's absolutely phenomenal. We've loved every single moment of it. I'm not saying goodbye because we're coming back tomorrow. Yeah. Ken and I are going to do a show that's based on the comments, because we want to dig into the idea of what needs to be done in the off season. We stayed a little bit away from that. I know people were asking about it. That's why, because we're going to handle that tomorrow after Paul Maurice talks and Kevin Scheifele Day Off talks. So we will be back. But boy, oh boy, it's been fun connecting with you two guys. I've been trying to be a part, hang out with you guys like this in a manner like this. So it's been a lot of fun. Ken, you have something to say?
Just a quick one. Shameless self-promotion. I was on the Cole Perfetti call today, and I have a column up at sportsnet.ca that I think a lot of Jets fans will enjoy. He had some great words, and this is just another big piece of the Jets' future. Such an insightful person with such great passion for the game, and he spoke about all his experiences from losing in the gold medal game to the USA to winning a gold medal and being in that dog pile with Team Canada at the World. So really interesting stuff from Cole that I hope you'd enjoy if you have a moment.
We're going to do this at 3:00 tomorrow. And Ken, how like you to just take and make it all about yourself at the end?
For sure. Got to stick to the brand. Exactly. Got to stick to the brand.
So 3:00 tomorrow, we're doing it. I know there's been some requests, so I'll make it make sense. I'm going to throw on the headband because we're going to play Sean's headband to take us out of the show. And we'll play Kenny's entrance music, because they're my two favorite songs. I can't get enough of them. Let's rock it here, and let's see everybody tomorrow at 3:00 after Winnipeg Sports Talk. We love hanging out with you. Let's do it again tomorrow. Scott, Hammy, thank you very much. We'll see everyone tomorrow.
Thanks, guys.